Uber offices who devote their space every night.
Everyone, welcome to our Uber offices space at DuPont. My name is Laura, and this is Jasmine, my coworker. We are the community managers here at Uber offices, which means we do everything from clean up after you to make sure that everything is working well, to make sure you're the most profitable and successful that you can be. We love working with startups and entrepreneurs, and we love hosting events like this in our space. If you're interested in office space, desk space, virtual office space, or in hosting an event like this in our space, we left our cards up here for you. Again, I'm Laura and Jasmine. Please enjoy the facility, enjoy the beer, enjoy the pizza, enjoy the presentation. We're always happy to have people come in. And Jasmine will stick around for a little bit after the event. She can answer any questions that you have, and we hope you enjoy your time here. Cards are here. So again, thank you. Have a nice time.
All right. So also like to introduce Mr. Batty here. He's one of the co-hosts of OWASP PC, and more importantly, no, not more importantly, his company also happily and proudly supplies the pizza. So yes, we like to do that.
In addition to buying pizza, Excella does software development, and we have several both commercial and federal projects in the DC area. We keep it about 50-50, and we have larger projects up to like 20 developers, all the way down to some multiple projects. And we do look for new developers all the time, so if you're interested, look us up. My name is Brian Batty. You can shoot me an email or talk to me afterwards. And we have another representative, Pat Leone, talk to him as well, and enjoy the presentation.
Cool. So how many people here, this is your first time at OWASP PC? All right, pretty nice, pretty reasonable. So I'm going to project more towards the back of the audience, so there are more people there. So OWASP, if you haven't heard of it, Open Web Application Security Project. It's a global nonprofit 501c3 based in the US, focused on software security or application security, or whatever term you particularly want to use today. It's an open group. Everything that OWASP does is open source. I can never keep straight which one's free as in beer and which one's free as in the other, but that's all right. It's all open source. It's free. Everything's available. There's a whole bunch of really great resources to talk about application security on the website. There's a whole bunch of awesome projects that people do for documentation or making tools or whatever else. So if you like what you've seen and want to learn more about security, please go to owasp.org. It is a great resource. And there's a lot of local organizations, the local chapters, kind of us here in DC and this guy's chapter in Northern Virginia, do a lot of the awesome work at the ground level. So thank everybody for coming. And no further ado, thank you to the speakers, Ken Johnson, Chris Gates, the people who you really came here to listen to, not me. If you have any questions about OWASP, my name's Mike Rinaldi over here, manning the Crowdcast. We're the other co-organizers, so give us a holler if you have any questions. And with that, it's all you. Thanks.
So figure it out.
Technology.
You're good. Okay.
Do we have any technologists here?
Technology.
I can break it, I can't fix it.
Thanks to all of you for coming out, because it's super cold and super terrible out. So thanks for that. Good show of support. I'm Ken Johnson. I'm the CTO of Invisium. We deal with a lot of the technology that you'll be seeing, so I hope that lends some credibility to me. And I work on Rails. Thanks. And I work on Rails Goat. And if you haven't checked out SecCast, it's a free. You can learn application security for free. So I'd check it out.
I would check it out too. Chris Gates, Carl Lonage is Twitter. I've been doing this for a few years. I'm pretty active with Nova Hackers, co-founded it. Security engineer at Facebook. We're always hiring, so if anyone's interested at Facebook to work for Facebook, come see me. We always have jobs. Next.
Okay, so I kind of don't even want to talk about that. The reason behind this talk, I think, as being here, numbers kind of shows why this talk is important. But one thing I did want to clarify is that we had a little bit of feedback that our our title was misleading. It's DevOps, right? So this is about the tooling that DevOps shops use, not DevOps itself. Get that out of the way, and I think we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, the first bullet says, right? The infrastructure that supports a lot of those initiatives.
Right. Putting things out quickly, making sure environments aren't fragile. That was a Freudian slip. So we're gonna talk about these things. I don't think we need to go into it, right? All right.
We can just talk through that.
Okay.
So GitHub search. How many people have GitHub accounts? Awesome, like everybody. Do you guys know it has an advanced search operator like Google? Who knows that it does that? Cool, a handful of people. So you can look for interesting things, snippets of code, broken things, vulnerable things via the via the GitHub search operators in there. So why that's important if you're doing pen testing or you're working for corporate security is you want to check for employee repo uh-ohs. Whose company has private GitHub? Several, right? So as people are members of those projects, as they leave the company or do other things, they can sometimes commit code to the wrong repo or do other things. So it's important to check those things, internal project names, passwords, key files, those sorts of other sorts of things.
I know both you and I have used this to actually gain access, so yeah, very useful stuff.
Sure.
The only person to be convicted coming out of the financial crisis was a programmer who moved his code from Goldman Sachs to a GitHub repo. And
I did not know that. I mean, I know that case, but I didn't know that's because it was in the GitHub repo. Awesome.
Oh, that's really
So it's so if you're in the pen tester type or you're doing corporate stuff, you should definitely check that.
Yes. Oh yeah, and so as an attack technique, what we'll typically do is, all right, so you're a person on GitHub, you have an organization that you belong to. Great. So if we're going after an organization, we'll look for the individuals that are throughout that organization, and then we'll go to their personal repos, so on and so forth, kind of iterate from there. So not only the company's public stuff, but also the people that work for them, their private as well, public. In GitHub terminology, public stuff. Okay, so GitHub, actually this comes out of something interesting one of my developers did. So it was kind of interesting. We noticed like, this isn't the person committing code to this repo that it says it is. So looked into it, and so GitHub specifically, one thing that they do that's interesting anyways, is they leverage the same technology that GitLog does. So they use your git config to actually show who you are when you commit code. So what's cool about that is, and maybe some of you get this joke, but I thought, hey, why don't I try to be Linus Torvalds when I commit code up to GitHub? So I changed the kind of the little, the thing is you have to get this, you can't see this, and I apologize, but there's a name and email in your git config. And if you get the name and the email combo right, it shows your avatar, it shows your handle, it looks like you committed, or somebody else, whoever's in that git config committed code. So I just did a little bit of probing, and I found his email address and used his username. And sure enough, it's hard to see, but there is his avatar. It looks like Linus Torvalds committed code in my repo and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. Doesn't mean you have rights, but this could be used in interesting ways if you were to say, try and fork and then send in a pull request to the repo and maybe have some code earlier on that pull request that looks like it was maybe merged in by a valid person. So it's just important to be very cautious and careful. And also, I really wish that GitHub would use either your HTTPS or your SSH key to actually show who's committing. But I suspect, given that it works off the Git protocol, and this is a piece of the Git protocol, it's not the easiest thing to do. Does everybody understand that, by the way? Is there anybody? Okay. And then this is the Git log. It looks like Linus was committing code, so that's fun. One All right. So in terms of the fix, like I said, be suspicious of pull requests. Really monitor who's doing what if it's something you care about. And then also, when employees leave, it's important to remember that even if you have a private repo, for instance, up on GitHub, and this goes true for GitHub Enterprise as well. If you have, but I think it's more important for GitHub.com. Anyways, if you fork a repo, you're an employee, you fork a repo, you leave the company or somebody, basically like takes away your rights or I don't know. Think of a scenario. Your fork doesn't actually go away. So what the company or the organization has to do is, so what an organization has to do is actually go through some steps that are listed in these links, and the slides will be available to actually, what you basically want to do is periodically audit who has forks out there and then destroy those forks and say you can't have access anymore because you're not with our organization. So incredibly important to audit. Do you have anything on that before we move on?
Anybody, how many pen testers do we have? Like a handful? All right. So pen tester by trade. For a few pen tests I've come across, have people that have publicly exposed, they're basically managing a site via Git and will leave that .git folder publicly accessible. A couple people are like, oh crap, yeah, so that's bad. So what that does is if you can, Git will basically pull that back together for you on your end. If you're able to download the config files and all the various pieces of that, you can basically recurse down on that locally and then have a full copy of the site and basically everything in that Git repo locally for you. So pretty bad. So to do that, you can use wget if directory listings are on, and then some other tools, which we'll talk about. So here's an example if directory listings are enabled. Pretty simple. Make your directory, CD into it, and then just mirror the site and include the .git folder. So basically, we'll into those and then download everything for you, right? Once you have all that code, git reset hard, and you have the entire site. So I've seen a lot of people are managing their WordPress blogs with that. So you'll get the config files. A lot of times people are pretty good. They'll have a backup, so they put that in there too because that's a good place for it. So you'll get database dumps, config files, MySQL passwords, and everything else. So something to look for.
I've heard of you actually using that in the past couple years, at least twice. I've heard cool stories from that, yeah. So it's real. So that's just a listing of Google search of 20,000 sites that had directory listings enabled for it. All right, so that's the one, wget, mirror it, and you've got all of it. So if it's not enabled, all is not lost, right? You can basically just run a check, look for git config or one of the other common files that are always present. If that's present, then you can use dvcs pillage, dvcs ripper to download that, or you can roll your own. Since there's a lot of developers here, you can do that. But also, so dvcs pillage also will do Mercurial and Bazaar too. So. That was Adam Baldwin who wrote that, right?
Yeah. Awesome guy.
Awesome guy.
So what you get, creds, I mean, all the things that you guys all use Git, right? You know what you shove in there and what you probably don't want everyone else getting access to, right? Creds, config, source code. I've pulled down for pen tests, database backups, backups of the sites, SSH keys. I mean, if you have a database backup for the blog, then you have basically admin for the blog, and then you can move on from there. So. Session keys, that's always bad too.
Yes.
Who has GitHub Enterprise? Nobody. Lies. Okay, one. All right, so typically people will tie that into their local LDAP or Active Directory. So I've done a couple talks in the past on how basically easy it is to guess one single Active Directory password. There's usually very little restrictions on that, so you get one kiosk, test account. You can log into the internal GitHub repo. It's internal, so you know there's creds and keys and everything else you need in that repo. So something to do if you're doing internal pen testing or find yourself internal.
It's internal, so it's safe, right?
While pen testing.
Should be all right.
Definitely been able to use that in the past. I mean, everyone treats internal GitHub Enterprise as safe. So. So Subversion, pre-Git. So with 1.6 and earlier, it had a SVN entry file. You could basically walk that chain and retrieve all the source for things. There's a Metasploit module that will do that, so it's listed there. In very, very tiny font, but when you look at the slides, you'll be able to read it. Is a awesome blog post on like how to use the various tools to do that, to do basically the same attack we did with Git. 1.7, they switched to using a SQLite database, but you can basically do the same thing. If that wc.db is exposed, you can download it, and everything is there. You can just pull it out with SQLite commands.
Oh, did you want to talk about that? No.
There's a Metasploit module for that too. That one, or you want me to do it?
Nah, go ahead.
Do it. Anybody use Git list? Anybody heard of it?
Nobody.
Nobody uses it. Okay.
Awesome.
6 million people use it.
Almost 6.5 million.
So, and that was back in when we did the slide, so November. So maybe
Right
one.
now, yeah.
All right. I was pretty shocked when I did that search. I was like, I'd never heard of this tool. But then the exploit came out, and we were like trolling around looking for stuff. I was like, awesome. A lot of people using it. Pretty popular. So basically, it has a remote code execution basically via the URL, couple of ticks, and you can just basically run whatever shell command you want.
This says who am I and
Yeah, and so and then there's no such path Dave, so it's running as Dave. Seems legit. And there's a Metasploit. So I used to have an @Metasploit account. I used to commit. Don't anymore. But I still love the project, and I use Metasploit for everything because it's open source and you can write your own stuff. So that's my. There'll be a reoccurring theme of there's a Metasploit module for that, and so there's a Metasploit module issue too. So if you find a site that's got that, you can get your shell with that.
You want to talk about that?
I guess.
Well, I mean, I can explain Hudson and Jenkins.
You
Are
can
you
start. You can
anybody
ask the
familiar
question.
with Hudson Jenkins?
Who uses Hudson and Jenkins?
Okay.
All right, wait, 2 more people.
Which one is it?
Yes.
Every Jenkins is Hudson. That's all you have.
And every
So,
Hudson is Jenkins. So.
you know.
No? All right. False. All right. So essentially, this is used in continuous deployment. Runs your unit tests. So when you commit code, it detects the update and.
Hello.
That's not me, right? Detects the code change, runs the unit test, and tells you either you pass or fail.
Right, super popular. Also runs on top of Glassfish or Tomcat, which we all know have no issues whatsoever.
Fair assessment.
They're always kept up to date too,
Always up to date.
especially in
Never run in his root.
servers.
So this was a search we did, basically using Shodan to look for the X Hudson, because every Jenkins box is Hudson. So you can search for X Hudson, and that will find both Jenkins and Hudson servers. So in this case, this was
16,000.
16,000 on 8080, 3,000 on 80, 2,000 on 443. Now, a lot of times that will, you get the slide, yeah, a lot of times those will actually redirect you off to a login. Like that's what you should be doing, especially if it's publicly exposed, right? You should hit it, you should try to log into it. It says, no, you got to auth before you do anything. So we went through and did a one that who returns an HTTP 200 for when you hit that request, right? So that means there's what, no auth, right? Cool. So we had like 9,000 there, 1,500 there. So quite a bit of stuff indexed that is Jenkins open.
Most of it looks to be the US, not all the countries.
So there's a Metasploit Aux module. The auxiliary modules are basically like vuln checks. So in this case, you can give it an IP, and it will basically say are various known vulnerable paths to Jenkins exposed. So script, view all new jobs. Async people will show you a list of all the users on the box, and the system info will tell you, is it on Windows, is it on Linux, what's it running, all that. Okay, so they ship by default with no auth. So anybody seeing the script page for that? Anybody know what the script console is or heard of that? Okay, so Jenkins ships with a Groovy console. Groovy. So if that's unauth, it's trivial to gain remote code execution. There's a Metasploit module, but there's also a picture. So basically, you can shove these 5 and run whatever shell commands you want on it, and it will actually output that back to to the website for you. So in this case, we ran the who am I command, and we get that we're running as Jenkins, which is the default user for that, right? Is it good, bad? I mean, it's good for me. It's bad for everybody. I love it. So Metasploit ships with a module that will actually handle all authenticated requests to that too, but in this case, it was no auth and trivial to get shells with that when it's open. It's pretty awesome. So you can lock it down. What's the best thing you should do is like turn on auth, right? So step number one, make sure you need a login to do that. However, if it's set to local auth, I've run into cases where you could just register. So that's awesome. So you just register, log in, and then do the same thing. Or if it's set to like AD or LDAP auth, you can do the same thing as we kind of talked about with the GitHub Enterprise stuff.
Yeah, when we walked through that, I could see how like somebody could very easily screw up auth on, because it's got some, bunch of options.
Yeah, to be fair,
to
be fair, there's like 4 different plugins to do auth, and there's many options. You can do AD, LDAP, local database auth. It's actually pretty confusing and really easy to break that. When testing that, and you're like, oh well, I'm gonna learn how to give advice to people and say, hey, here's how to auth. And if they come back and ask the relevant question of like, what's the best way to do that, which is what a good client would do, I want to have an answer for them, or maybe a tutorial I can hand them. And it's pretty quickly to like forget to check a box and be locked out of your Jenkins install. So.
Yeah, I think that's why people kind of take the approach of if it's internal, like, yeah, whatever, don't worry about it. But
you want to do that one?
Sure. Oh yeah. So what this is that when you run a job inside of Hudson Jenkins, you can actually, the way you do it is you basically give it some commands that it runs, which are bash commands. So that's cool. Starts off pretty cool. So was this?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, no, I was just gonna say because I wasn't sure which IP we were doing that with. But anyways, we have netcat running. We gave this command inside that bash piece that Jenkins Hudson gives you. And so what ends up happening is we were just listening on the other box, and so we had same thing as you see with most.
It's a little contrived, netcat, right? Because you probably shouldn't have netcat traditional on these things. However, there's pages and pages, like on PyTestMonkey or whatever, on how to get a shell with Bash and Python and Ruby and pretty much every other library that you'll have available. So it's really telling you that you can run whatever commands you want via that build process, and you can have it write files, make users. It just all depends.
Yeah,
sky's the limit.
And there's things held on that box that are keys used for certain. One of the stories, I won't go into specifics, but there are things that are held on those boxes. And I only won't go into specifics because we ran out of time. But on those boxes, there's keys used to sign things, and you can.
If they have slave nodes, right? If they have slave nodes, they're going to have the SSH keys to actually SSH into those Jenkins slave nodes. They're going to be readable by that user, right? So you'll be able to read those SSH keys out, and then you can just log into those and start spreading.
So cat and bash scripting is really fun in this. But the other thing is you can browse workspaces.
Yeah, so a lot of times they'll lock that other stuff down. So that is super loud. If you can get access, like they'll have script locked down, they'll have viewing the jobs locked down, but they'll allow you to browse the workspaces, which is actually kind of the function of Jenkins. You want to be able to look at code and see why it's building. So if you can look in that, you can view source and download the source of the projects, which also may have config keys. So in this case, this is Rails app, and it had passwords. It's a Rails app, right? Yeah.
Yep. And this one.
Yeah, this is another one we found while we were kind of doing research. It had the secret token for the Rails app in it.
That's why we tell people to keep stuff out of sources on the AppSec side of the world anyways. Keep it out of source because, so Django, Rails, you get these secret tokens and can be in really good shape, especially considering that Metasploit, your favorite framework, has a remote code execution.
There's a Metasploit
module. So if you give it a secret token, it can, because Rails uses marshalling to actually read sessions. So if you steal something like this session key, you can forge sessions. It'll Rails applications will take it as valid, and because it's using Marshall to read those values, Marshall takes content and turns it into remotely executable code. So
Seems legit.
awesome stuff. All that from leaving a token in the source. So real quickly, I'm going to talk about AWS, maybe not too quickly. So with AWS, there's just a few gotchas I kind of wanted to mention. The first one is if you're using like the Elastic Beanstalk and basically the AWS CLI DevTools. Anybody have any familiarity with AWS CLI DevTools? Okay,
Cool, got a couple.
Awesome. So these are tools that allow you to push up new code, spin up instances, basically create applications and do that quickly, as well as spin up EC2 instances and a bunch of other stuff. The problem is that creds when you use these tools. So if it asks you, hey, what are your access keys? Access keys being the keys to the kingdom. It'll just store them in a file under your hidden directory under your home profile. So you'll have, in this case, we had our access key ID and secret access key. If you have any familiarity at all with AWS, it's very likely that has that person that's pushing up code and spawning up instances has a lot of permissions, which means you can basically just ruin everything. You can take it all. So just ruin everything and have a walk away. So why we talked about this though was for folks that wanted to pivot. They're already on somebody's machine. Maybe they send them a phishing link and they're like, what do I do? This is what you do. You go to these files. So this one's AWS hidden directory and the file name's config. Again, you'll have the slides. This one's specifically for Elastic Beanstalk. So when you are spinning up Elastic Beanstalk instances, not only do you have the access keys, but you have these database passwords and plain text in that file. So I don't really have a great solution for it other than just remove it or.
I mean, it's something to be aware of,
sure,
or
yeah.
if you've got something where you're backing up everyone's home directories, you may want to like search for that and like, hey, move that stuff or be aware that it's there. I know when you showed me this, I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine how many shells I've missed by not even knowing to search for this stuff. So.
Yeah, so it's dangerous. I don't really have a fix, but if you're a pen tester, hey, we're in business. We're good.
Lots of creds. Creds all day.
And if you are a pen tester, use, cannot say his name, Andre Rancho? Is that how you say it?
W3AF guy?
Yeah, W3. He wrote W3AF and he's got Nimbo Stratus, which is essentially, once you have those access keys I showed, you can use this to completely pivot and do like all kinds of fun things, from footprinting the AWS environment to just burning it all to the ground, just having a good time.
That's why I do this.
Yeah. Or you can just leverage.
I'm a fixer in training at the new job. Yeah.
All right. Well, actually, there's one last thing. Oh, no, sorry. All you, man. So, client.
Chef. Who uses Chef? All right. Who's heard of Chef? All right, cool. It allows you to make configs for various things. So, ships with default creds. No one ever forgets to change those, but in the event that you find one where they haven't changed, it does tell you what to try. Or you can try other things. So the default is admin and PA at SSW ORD1, 0RD1. Super secure. It can leak environments of the various. So in this case, it's all the various staging and prods and all that. I guess that's interesting. Anybody know what the data bags are for Chef? Cool, right? So that's we don't want to always just store creds and source. We've just talked about that like 5 times, right? So Chef gives you the ability to not store your password in the source that you're in the code that you're going to deploy on the remote host. So it does that via data bags. Knife is the command line utility that ships with that allows you to do that. Tons and tons of options. The simple way to do that, if you gain access to a server that you think has Chef, is knife data bag list. And if there's anything there, we'll show you all sorts of interesting things. So in this case, it would have said, hey, there's a Drupal key, and you could do knife data bag show Drupal. In this case, we have admin password and keys, right? So
Can you guys see the creds? Anybody? Like back in the back, can you see the creds? Yeah. All right, cool.
Slides are on my blog if anyone's actually looking at them right now and irritated they can't see. It also allows you to encrypt these data bags. And how it does that is basically you give it a key file and it will encrypt those for you. So then when you run that on an encrypted data bag, you get the encrypted data, which is good. That's how we want it to be. However, usually that file is local to the host, so you can basically just pass it the secret file and it will decrypt it for you. So, something to be aware of, like if you're doing that, like you should not store that secret file and maybe in the repo with all your chef recipes or something like that.
That's a good tip. Good tip.
Vagrant. Who uses Vagrant? Anybody heard of Vagrant? Who's heard of Vagrant? Cool, a lot of people. Who uses Vagrant? Awesome. Not as many, but quite a few. Awesome. Everyone know that it ships with a default private key. Oh, excuse me. It used to ship with a default SSH key. You guys aware of that? No? Yes? Cool. Cool. All right, everybody knows. Cool. Default creds and default key, no pass to sudo. So basically, if people have been lazy or they're just testing, you can root Vagrant into things. Super fun from Pentest land. It has been fixed for the most part. So 1.7 and maybe it's 1.71 will definitely has a auto rekey function. So it's kind of killed this attack. And then you can also do like one-time SSH sharing if you need to I need to allow Ken to get into that box for a second. There's ways to do that too.
Fixes are up on the slide.
Yeah, it's right there. So what happens is you can basically there's a Metasploit module for it, scan for SSH logins with that default public key. So that just shows I'm testing the network for that private key. Get the slide. This is kind of the results of that. So that's all that it's found. So I was like super excited. I had found all of these keys that looked like they worked.
This is the next one.
Yeah. And then when you go back and you need to go back and do a version. So most of these ended up being like the Kippo honeypot / a lot of them ended up being like the Git service. So where you can hit it with the Git and it's doing SSH, but it's actually not an interactive shell. But there were a couple that were actually legit SSH clients. So in that case, you can just SSH pass that default key that it ships with to the IP address. You'll be Vagrant when you get in, but there's no password to sudo, right? Because we had that on a couple slides. Just sudo as root, now you're root on these boxes. So
Sort of a big problem.
If you're interested in getting really, really dirty with people, there's a great blog post at that link on basically how to put up, because it shares your Git directory with Vagrant, you can put a post commit hook from the Vagrant directory and that will possibly run on the host. So you can get, somebody gets it, that's awesome. So you can do some pretty dirty stuff with post commit hooks. So yeah, there's probably, I think there was some other news about that pretty recently too, but I don't remember.
So much news.
So much news.
Who can read?
So super fun. Kickstart. So Kickstart's maybe like the precursor to some of these Docker and these other things. Everybody know what it is or heard of it? Right? So basically we can specify the setup that we want on these Linux boxes and they'll run this Kickstart script and it will make it an Apache web server or MySQL box or whatever. 3 ways to set the root password as we install it, crypted with the hash, so root is crypted or in plain text. So some examples I found trolling the web. So we have a crypted one there, plain text one there. So useful if you can find that internally or externally for an organization. Just another set of examples.
Oh, more creds.
More creds. Me?
Yeah, this one's you. Sorry, man.
Who uses Elasticsearch? I love it. Elasticsearch is awesome. I'm actually new to all these DevOps tools the last year or so. It's super cool. Next. Listens on 9200. No authentication. So from like the highest level point of view, there's usually no auth on these things. You can just do requests to the web server and pull down data. That's only as interesting as the data that your Elasticsearch instance is holding. So if it's your prices for whatever you sell, not super interesting. If it's other things, it can be more interesting. You update data with the puts. And was everybody aware there was remote code execution prior to 1.2.0?
Was anybody?
There was. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, so slide. So there's a Metasploit module, because there's a Metasploit module for everything. Basically, it has an issue with Java, and it will basically run Java code for you. If you're running a vulnerable version, it will push up a jar and execute it for you, and you get a shell. It's pretty awesome. Easy to fix, just not use 1.2.0 and below. Fixed after that. Kibana. Anybody who uses Elasticsearch, doing it over like xput and xget and everything else is super lame to query data, so you can use Kibana. Basically, just a nice GUI graphical thing to view data in that Elasticsearch instance. So, slide. So from a pen test perspective, if you find one that's open, you can point Kibana at it, and then you can kind of visually see what data that Elasticsearch instance is holding. It's way better than going through it manually.
Pretty graph.
Pie chart. Yeah, it's legit. So top has the pie chart, and then you can like dig into document types. And then once you get in one of the macro things, you can kind of see all the different things. So in this case, we have ID, index type, and name. Not super sexy from a fun perspective, but maybe this had config information or whatever. Sky's the limit on what people are shoving into Elasticsearch these days. So, and then you can drill down into the whole document too.
Hey, you don't have to talk now. Okay, break for a second. Yeah. All right. So Redis. I'm sure you are all familiar with it. Is anybody not familiar with Redis? Okay. So imagine you want to basically, instead of using a database and querying that, you want to store things in memory in something that's running all that information in memory. It's pretty cool. But Redis, however, there's a few catches with it. So for one, there's no support for encryption right now. So anything you're passing to it, it doesn't go over SSL. That doesn't exist. However, there is this link this has been updated since the last time we did this talk, as of today. So this link shows a thread of people pitching in on Redis to try and, it's still an ongoing thing where they're trying to get SSL implemented in it. There are no credentials for it. I believe, yes, so you can configure credentials, but most people don't, and I'll show some examples of that. Automatically on port 6379, people don't seem to ever change that. So if you're trying to attack it, you got a good place to start. And it binds to all interfaces by default. So if you don't protect it, it's accessible to anyone. Keep it off the internet. That's the moral of the story. So I was actually just taking a subsection of versioning for Redis. So it was just 2.8.3. It's a very specific version. And out of that search for Redis servers, version 2.8.3 came up with about 1,100 results out there. And again, very specific version, a little bit more recent. When I look at older versions, there's a lot more out there. So, okay, cool. So that gives us a starting point to find some boxes. The thing with Redis is when you try and pilfer through that data via command line, it's kind of painful. You get something like this where, actually, I remember you complaining about it. It was like, this is mind-numbing.
Yeah, it's hard to find anything useful out of that.
It is. It looks like mostly junk until you use like GUI, Redis Desktop Manager. And you can't see it, so it has less impact, but there's an email and password in here, and people are just shoving user data into it, keeping it, had it on the internet. I'm sorry, in our lab. So. And then this one, the title's awesome, feel lucky, but you can't, again, see it, sorry. So it's just lottery information. Basically, it's everybody's kind of got this lottery going on. They're storing all the information. And so if you want to maybe game the system, that would be a cool instance of where there's some interesting data.
Or just delete everyone's shit except for yours.
Or just delete well, and that's yeah, so that's the next slide. So flush all can ruin people's days. That'll get rid of everything. That's a fun one. Script load, you can load Lua scripts. So one thing you should know about Redis is that it allows you to script and allows you to interact, but it all kind of runs in this Lua sandbox, and we've been trying to get remote code execution on it. It's come along. We'll see. We'll see if we can get it.
They've done some work to make it not trivial to run Lua OS exec commands. So kudos for that.
Yeah, because most of the libraries that are that come default that would allow you to operate at a system level, they're all completely omitted, and it specifies exactly what types of functions you can call. And
so that's good. It's not bad.
So it's not that bad. They've done a good job. And actually, I like this product except for it's super insecure. But eval and eval SHA. So eval, you type in eval, you put in some Lua code, you get a SHA value back, and then you just execute eval SHA with that SHA value, and then
and it runs your Lua code.
Runs your Lua code. Awesome. So again, we're still working on the remote code execution, hopefully at some point. And then again, Adam Baldwin, you heard us say earlier about DVCS pillage. He wrote that. He also wrote a Redis. Basically, you can distribute SHA cracking using open Redis servers, and he has some proof of concept code. Again, really awesome guy.
So if you're cracking SHA passwords, scan the internet, you got a botnet to do your cracking for you.
Yeah. There's still more images up here, but
Memcache. So Memcache is probably the precursor to a lot of these newer NoSQL databases. In memory, super fast. No code exec with Memcache specifically, although there's been a lot of talks on using like Python serialization and some other things that usually ship with a lot of the tools using that to do that. So we'll try to get that into the next talk. But people shove interesting things into it, like private keys, because seems legit, right? Like that's where I store all my private keys is in Memcache on the internet.
What's the IP?
I don't know. Passwords. So in this case, we had username and password in the Memcache thing. I think there's another slide.
Yeah.
And then went through and validated that those creds actually worked to get into the box. It ended up being like a PHP MyAdmin type app.
Did I go too far?
No. Let's see.
Okay.
Talking fast, man. I love it.
Yeah, you're a speed talker.
Just want to get it over with. All right, so things you can take home, right? So I guess a lot of people on Twitter are kind of complaining like we give talks and people are like, oh, this is all jacked up and don't send you home with anything to do. So I'm going to try to send you home with something to do tomorrow. So if you have Jenkins, go through and make sure that you have auth turned on for it, right? So relatively simple to do. There's lots of documentation on how to do it, right? So you take down a pretty good chunk of attack vector if you can turn off authentication on for that. All right, I'll just read them, I guess. Use ACLs and router ACLs and firewall ACLs to protect that stuff off, right? So your whole CorpNet probably doesn't need access to your Memcache or Elasticsearch instances or anything else, right? So you need to approach a lot of that is if someone gets a phish and they end up on an employee laptop in Corp, what do I have in dev prod or whatever? Can they just get access to that stuff? A lot of people treat that as one giant flat network. You should consider restricting access to those sorts of things, right? Or shoving them in a VLAN and doing other. There's many, many, many ways to network protect those things, but if you don't, you should consider doing that. If you're still using default Vagrant private keys, switch those out, and then update to the latest versions of your fancy tools.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that before we end that this is sort of a weird thing because in organizations, I could say that we're coming across, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but basically there's who owns that type deal, right? It's like GitHub and managing that. It's code, right? So it goes to AppSec folks. And then there's some stuff that's networky, right? It's like memory databases, in-memory databases, essentially. There's just this weird area where all these tools are kind of used for this DevOps practice, this continuous deployment. And nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but in a lot of organizations, nobody is really responsible for it all. And it's this weird area. Chris works in network security primarily. I work in application security primarily. However, we're both starting to overlap, and that's how this talk came out. We were like, You deal with that, I deal with that. And so it's just a weird new kind of, on the cusp of a new kind of thing that's going on right now from a security perspective. So
a lot of those are moving so fast too that they're just shoving new functionality out. Your devs are trying that and bringing them up on the network, and you don't know what they're connecting to it with, how secure they are. A lot of them don't ship securely by default, although if you read the docs, there's ways to secure them. And that's probably, I don't know if it probably needed to be added, but a lot of these tools have documentation that will help you lock these down. They just don't ship by default in a secure way. So
I don't want to tell people how to fix stuff.
Trying to be a fixer.
He's being nice.
My new life.
I don't care. So yeah.
Any questions on any of that? I know there's a lot, so
If you can just repeat the questions. So.
I'll try. I'm pretty bad at that. But
I'll
try.
reiterate that.
Okay.
Sound good?
Thank you, though. Sure.
Hey, Chris, what advice do you have, I guess, if you're doing internal pen tests, on a fairly large network, say like a B class or something? Is this something that you're actively targeting, like these vulnerabilities against DevOps, or are you just sort of taking what comes to you during your discovery, during your discovery scans and your exploration, and then, because there might be easier targets to go after than these, perhaps, though they look pretty easy to go after.
Gus asked, do you really do this? Do you really go after these things?
Excellent question. I'd say in the last year or so that we've been kind of chatting about this, I use it more.
Is that because you're at Facebook now for more?
So a little prior to Facebook, I started learning about like Chef and Jenkins, because there's been a lot of blog posts on how easy it is to break into Jenkins. So that kind of got my interest peaked in that, and I started doing some research like, oh, wow, there's this giant land of DevOps tools. I mean, it's massive.
That list you initially sent me was like 5 pages long of a Word doc of like, yeah, we should check out this
just
stuff.
various interesting things. So so that's going to be very dependent on the maturity of the network that you're pen testing, right? Some places, yeah, there's places that still have 08067 around, or plenty of easy remote code exec stuff. And we can go, and you can go that route. I'll say 2 things on that. One, vulnerability scanners right now are doing a very poor job on identifying these tools. Like really poor job at identifying a lot of this stuff and helping you find. Good example, Nessus and Nexpose won't tell you right now if you have OpenScript for Jenkins. So that's a big fail on their part that stuff's not there. So if you're doing a pen test where you're running Nessus or Nexpose on that, you're not gonna see any of that stuff. In addition to that, that's why a human should be involved. So yes, in the past I missed a lot of this. I can't really talk about how Facebook insides work, at least not while we're streaming, but they're pretty good, right? So there's less of that sort of stuff. And if a place is pretty good, you may have to look at other avenues of things like your DevOps tools or custom web apps that people run inside or whatever to do that. It's kind of around. If you can talk later, I can give you a little bit. But I missed a lot. I think we're kind of doing this to raise awareness on this, so people know to test for some of this, and some pen testers can go through and find this stuff, because we've had 50,000 breaches, right? So it'd be nice if people would start taking a little more time to secure some of these things.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are missing this when we do just basic network level pen testing.
Yeah.
And you might get Nessus just reports that this is running a web page and you actually have to go to it and manually investigate it.
Right. I mean, Memcache is a great example, right? Memcache is running. If I don't go get the crappy Ruby script that someone wrote or write some code, because there's not a lot of code to actually, you have to basically roll your own code to write a Memcache tool that will actually dump it for you, right? There's like 1 or 2 tools that will do it. So Nessus telling me that it's there isn't super useful. I mean, you've got to query and dump all that data to look and see if there's anything interesting. If I'm on a pen test, maybe if I'm getting stuck, that I go down that route.
And it's always a time bounce too.
Yeah.
How much time you have.
I mean, a lot of that stuff, is I've seen outside. So obviously more critical when people are running that stuff in their AWS cloud, or it's just not locked down from outside. So certainly more important from an external pen. Internal pen, you might probably find a lot easier ways to get where you're going.
So with some of the stuff you can use Nessus to scan for, you said that GitHub has a pretty good search. Have you found any good tools for automating alerting of, all right, day one you go in, you find 500 results on GitHub, you tell the developers to clean that up. Day 5 or 6, you cleaned all that up, but they've accidentally put stuff on there. So essentially alerting on all these different things that you talked about. Have you found any good methods for doing that?
You want to reiterate? Remember,
You did it, and I was, yeah, good job. Chris reiterated, or reminded. So basically the question was, can you monitor GitHub for, like, if you lock it down, fix everything, but some changes are made that are insecure, is that, you know, is there a tool to monitor that and alert you? The answer is, I mean, unless something popped up, I haven't seen anything.
I'm not aware of anything.
Because I looked for that specifically when I was internal on, you know, ops side of things, blue team side of things. Couldn't find anything. So
Probably wouldn't be too hard though to write some scripts, especially if you're like worried about your own company, to via those operators search within your company's repos, or if you're motivated and get everyone that's a member of those to control those. I mean, it's not like a 5-line script by any means, but I'm not aware of anything that does that. So there's a appliance opportunity for somebody that's listening to. Same kind of the same thing for Pastebin and things. Like I do know some people who have some businesses around trolling Pastebin for interesting things. Right, so you could do that as well. But I don't know of anything that you can just go buy right now that does that.
Okay. So you actually, the two of you touched on AWS API keys. There was a good piece written about a gentleman who had a $2,000 bill because he accidentally uploaded his S3 keys to GitHub. And even though he wiped it within 5 minutes, a bot had picked up the keys and had spun up EC2 instances using his S3 API keys.
I saw that.
This was in the past week.
Yeah, like this is very recent.
but you can set thresholds if you wanted to.
So the statement was about the article about the guy that uploaded an AWS key for 5 minutes and a bot took it and ran up $2,000 worth of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess moral of the story is if you actually end up accidentally doing that, revoke the keys.
That's a very good point. Yeah. What he said was if you do that, revoke the key, not just delete it. That's an awesome point.
Also, you should set some thresholds because you can actually set, like, I don't want to spend this much. I don't want to spend past this amount of money in AWS in the billing management interface. So yeah, do that because it's a good call.
Yeah.
Cap it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I should.
Earlier you mentioned, I forgot which tool it was, but there was a vulnerability that was fixed in a later version, so make sure you have that later version.
Yeah.
If you were in a large organization with many different DevOps stacks on many different projects, what would you do? How would you keep track of all of that? How would you know if you have the latest version on every single tool, on every single project?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying, like, actually, you're saying, so if you have multiple organizations, a lot of DevOps tools all throughout it, how would you track that?
Yeah. Or one organization, multiple projects.
You mean in terms of like just like
What's installed,
writing it or like
knowing that you have
automated-
the latest version that's out there.
So that's a great question because going back to like vulnerability scanners right now are really bad at that.
all tooling around this basically is terrible.
Yeah. You could use like Chef and some other tools if you're doing that on servers to like make sure that you're doing that. But that involves like, hey, I have a daily Chef job that makes sure this server is running these things, which is a pretty mature process probably. That's one way to do it though. So you're saying, say maybe everyone in the org has dev servers they can use, whatever, and they're not just deving on their laptop, although you could do it on your laptop. But say they have servers that they use, you could set up Chef jobs to make sure that they're running required versions of software. And then they're going to have to like actually go through and uninstall that and install the wrong thing. And then ideally the next day it's just going to get overwritten anyway. So that's a way to do that. But you got to be on top of like your Chef recipes and doing all that. I mean, it's a very tough problem. There's no one.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a 1 or 2 person security team, you need to
Yeah.
have the ability to just buy something and let it just go. And,
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that the best thing is to we should all start putting pressure on Nessus and OpenVAS and Expos to actually start including these things in, right? So they're really prevalent. Like, I didn't think they were, but when we were doing the last con talk, there was a DevOps talk going on in San Francisco, and it was huge. It was all over Twitter. Like, it's a big deal. Big companies are using these tools. So we know these big companies have vulnerability management programs, but we also know now, like, they're missing all that stuff. I know for a fact that these tools are missing a good chunk of that stuff. So we all need to start putting pressure on these guys as customers to write these checks. That's kind of a long fix. But.
Make friends with your IT group. No.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, your chef guy or your devs. I mean, every place is different, but certainly as like really, really bad stuff comes out, like a good example, I think Vagrant was the tool, right? So is to like do an announcement or a brown bag or whatever, say, hey, if you guys use Vagrant, hey, it had a default key, just upgrade or change it out. And hopefully the guys and girls that are using that can go through like, oh crap, yeah, I do have a couple instances of that running. Let me just switch that out. It's really one command to run and do that. But then, that's being a pen tester, that's why you should be pen testing too. And that's why you should have a human doing it, right? Because humans are going to find that stuff, especially when vulnerability scanners are currently not. Well, maybe. You can always ask your pen tester to focus on that stuff too, right? Like, some shops are more inclined to do this stuff. So you could always say, hey, I'm really worried about these things. So instead of focusing on my Windows stuff, like ignore my Windows stuff and just scan all my Linux and Solaris or whatever, mostly Linux, right? Linux or my AWS ranges and look for interesting things for me there. That's also a way you could tackle that problem.
Chris, have you looked at Nessus for that though?
Have I worked at Nessus? Or
No. Have you used Nessus in a situation like that? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think if we give Nessus admin credentials, it will give you low, medium, and high ratings on things like that. I'm not 100% certain, but.
So the statement was that Nessus may do this.
You mean if you're running authenticated scans versus
Authenticated scans.
Yeah, but how often are you running authenticated?
I don't know. The answer was like, does Nessus find that if you do authenticated? I don't know. I never get to run authenticated Nessus scans.
Okay.
I mean, if the check isn't there, though, the check isn't there.
You can always write your own custom checks.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a vulnerability assessment team that's in the know.
Definitely.
Because we see this all the time, where Nessus, is becoming worse and worse, and the number of CVEs being reported is I think it's tripled in the past few years.
Right.
So we constantly need to write our own. So.
You can write your own script if you can't hear that on the mic.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that is definitely a solution. My con to that is your client, and depending on how much you're paying them, you should be like, hey, I want this, and you should get a pretty decent turnaround on that because you're paying them. That's their business model. Josh, that's a good question. Like, I'd have to check. I haven't gone through and done the load opponed check on all these yet.
I know because I was in ops.
I know
we had a separate team that did Nessus, and they would email us sometimes and be like, hey, these things are running outdated. Can you update them?
Yeah, so definitely if the check is there, and a lot of the good thing about a lot of the DevOps tools are a lot of them will return a banner, and you can get a pretty quick check on whether something's vulnerable or not. The check just has to be there. And I'm sure Ron Gula is going to tweet me and be like, hey, we have all these checks. In my experience, the last year or so, there haven't been as many as I would have liked to have. So is that truth today, January 7th? Maybe not. But in the past year of kind of looking at some of these, and as we did research for this, I did not see as many as you have seen. Hopefully that was political correct enough to say.
Listen, you have some DevOps, so just update the banner.
Yeah, of course, it's open source. You can just change it to whatever you want.
Did you say change the banner?
You said just change the banner. Yes.
change the banner on your tech stack and confuse scanners.
It's probably quicker to actually update it versus actually finding out where in code that prints it out when you connect. But no, I feel you on that. Any other questions? I'll be around if anyone's too shy to ask in front of everybody else. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
First off, thank you everybody for coming, especially, and thanks to everybody on the webcast. I hope it worked out. If you have any feedback, good or bad, please let us know. This is our first time doing it, so cross our fingers it worked out well. Next thing up, I just want to kind of give a short note to everybody that's new here. This was a really super technical, hacky, awesome talk for those of us that are pen testers. We do a lot of other stuff too that are around people that are building software or people that are more my job where I'm like corporate defending and putting controls in place and whatever else. So we have a pretty wide range of topics, so check back in and hopefully other things will also be interesting to you. The past year or so, we've been kind of getting this chapter up and running. We've been having kind of irregular meetings. We've been meeting sometimes on Thursdays, sometimes on Tuesdays, sometimes around. That is done. We are now meeting the first Wednesday of every month. Period, the end, except for August when everybody's going to be at DEF CON. Then we're going to delay it. So first Wednesday of every month, right here, we will be here. Let's see, am I missing anything else? Yes, I am. One other thing. We are looking for talks. So those of you who like or don't like and still want to do it, public speaking, and you have interesting things to talk about, let us know. If you have a short talk, you're like, I can't come up and talk for an hour, that's cool. If like 3 people come up and say, hey, I can talk for 20 minutes, guess what? We can do 3 talks, that's awesome. So let us know if you have something you want to talk about. Another thing, I've been talking with Jack, maybe. We did a builder breaker talk where it was myself and John over here did a 2-part talk on SQL injection a few months ago. We want to keep that train going and do some other talks like it. Really basic, introductory level stuff. Half of it from a pen tester side and half of it from more of the coder defender side on most common vulnerabilities. So if you're interested in talking about that, those of you who haven't presented before, come let me know and we'll get you out there. That's all I got. I think there's pizza left.
Yes, pizza and a couple beers, so please help yourself.
Yeah, so that's it for me, and thanks again to you guys.
You're welcome.